Good evening and welcome to a story we need to break down carefully tonight because there is a lot of noise around it and not enough clarity. The Sultan of Sokoto's palace has just issued a categorical denial, rejecting claims that His Eminence endorsed President Bola Tinubu for a second term in 2027. Stay with me to the end of this one because we are going to walk through exactly how this claim started, how it spread, and what an independent fact check found before we get into what it all actually means. This story lands at a particularly sensitive moment, with political temperatures already rising ahead of 2027, and it touches one of the most respected and most politically neutral institutions in the country, the Sultanate of Sokoto. So how this is handled matters well beyond Sokoto State itself. Before we go further, if you haven't already, do hit that like button and subscribe to NAIJA News Online. It genuinely helps this channel keep bringing you these breakdowns. Now, back to the news. To understand why a single social media clip could force a palace in Sokoto to issue a formal denial within days, you have to understand exactly what the Sultan of Sokoto represents in Nigerian public life. His Eminence Muhammad Sa'ad Abubakar III is the Sir King Musulmi, the spiritual leader of Nigeria's Muslim community, and he sits atop the Sokoto Caliphate, an institution whose religious and traditional authority traces back more than 200 years to the jihad of Shehu Usman Danfodio. This is not a ceremonial title in the way some might assume. It carries real social, religious, and moral weight, particularly across the north, but really across the country as a whole. Now, Nigerian traditional rulers operate under a convention, not a codified law, but a norm that is treated with almost the same seriousness as law in political culture: strict political neutrality. Governors, senators, presidential candidates of every party visit the Sultan's palace. They seek his counsel, his blessing, his mediation in times of crisis. That access only works, that trust only holds, because the Sultan is understood by everyone, APC, PDP, Labour Party, and every other party, to be above the fray. The moment that neutrality is credibly questioned, the very usefulness of the institution as a unifying moral voice for all Nigerians starts to erode. That is the stake here, and it's why the palace responded as fast and as firmly as it did. There's a second dimension worth flagging too. This story sits inside a much bigger and growing problem in Nigerian public life: the manipulation of trusted figures' images and words for political ends ahead of elections. Nigeria's 2027 general election is still some distance away, but as we've already started to see, and as we'll walk through tonight, the disinformation machinery around it is already running. Organizations like DUBAWA exist specifically to intercept and correct this kind of manufactured content, and DUBAWA's own investigation is central to how we know what actually happened here. So let's lay out the facts in order, because the sequence tells the story better than any summary can. On the 30th of July 2026, the Sultan of Sokoto attended a livestock conference in Abuja. This is documented and verified. At that event, he addressed government agricultural policy directly, commending the federal government for establishing the Federal Ministry of Livestock Development and expressing support for its reform agenda. That is the full and complete substance of what he said. Livestock policy, nothing about the 2027 presidential race, nothing about any candidate. 2 days later, on the 1st of August 2026, an ex-user identified as Habibu Yusuf Sudangi, posting from the handle at Habibu Yi Sudangi, uploaded a video from that appearance, but attached to it a caption claiming the Sultan had, in a live television appearance, declared President Tinubu the only choice for Nigerians and had called on citizens to back his re-election.
Some versions of the post circulating alongside it also claimed the Sultan had demanded the creation of a Fulani commission. This post spread fast, racking up thousands of views on X and crossing over onto Facebook within a short window, and according to fact-checkers who tracked its spread, it drew reactions carrying political and ethnic undertones well beyond the substance of the original footage. DUBAWA moved to investigate. Their fact-checkers traced the clip back to its actual source, confirmed it originated from the 30th of July livestock conference in Abuja, and published their verdict under a clear rating: misleading. Their finding was that the Sultan's remarks had been stripped of context. He praised a specific government policy on livestock. He did not endorse a second term for anyone. DUBAWA's language was direct. The claim that the Sultan declared Tinubu the only choice and called for Nigerians to vote for him does not reflect what was actually said. By Tuesday, the 4th of August 2026, with the claim still spreading, the Sultan's media team issued a formal statement made available to newsrooms including NAIJA News and signed by Prince Bashir Adefaka. I want to walk through the actual language of that statement because the wording is deliberate and it tells you how the palace wants this understood. The statement said their attention had been drawn to reports circulating on social media platforms, creating the impression that the Sultan had called on Nigerians to support President Tinubu's re-election in 2027. Their response, quoting directly, "It is not possible for the Sultan, as the father of all, to make such a statement either publicly or in any other forum." The statement went further, describing the institutions of monarchy and religion under his leadership as institutions of a father figure, and it explicitly stated that the Sultan has no preferred candidate for the 2027 presidential race. It urged the Nigerian public to reject any attempt to associate him with the campaign or candidacy of any individual, and it appealed directly to journalists, bloggers, and social media users to verify information before sharing it, warning that this kind of content is capable of misleading the public and dragging respected traditional and religious institutions into disputes that do not belong to them. Now, let's be precise about what is fact and what is interpretation here, because that distinction matters. It is documented fact that the Sultan spoke at a livestock conference on the 30th of July about agricultural policy. It is documented fact that a viral clip attributing a political endorsement to him began circulating from the 1st of August. It is documented fact that DUBAWA independently investigated and rated the endorsement claim misleading. And it is documented fact that the Sultan's own media team issued an unambiguous denial on the 4th of August, stating he holds no preference among 2027 candidates. What remains allegation, not fact, is the motive of the original poster. The palace's team has characterized the post as malicious and a deliberate, unpatriotic attempt to drag the Sultan into partisan politics for selfish interests. That is their reading of intent. As of this broadcast, there has been no public response from Habibu Yusuf Sudangi addressing either the DUBAWA fact-check or the palace's characterization of the post.
And we do not have independent confirmation of what actually motivated the original caption. Now, here's why I think this story deserves more attention than a single viral clip might normally get. This is not the first time in recent memory that the Sultanate has had to correct a false narrative about His Eminence, and the pattern is worth laying out. Go back to April 2025. The Sultan delivered a public lecture describing social media as something close to a terrorist organization, a remark that triggered national debate about free expression versus the unchecked spread of fake news and divisive rhetoric on platforms like Facebook, X, and WhatsApp. That comment did not emerge from nowhere. It reflected a building frustration shared across traditional and political leadership about how these platforms have repeatedly been used to misrepresent public figures and inflame division on platforms like Facebook, X, and WhatsApp. Then, in May 2026, the Sultanate Council found itself issuing another correction, this time over a video being recirculated and framed as a recent protest against the Sultan over the country's hunger situation. The council's public relations officer, Aminu Haliru Gidadawa, clarified in a statement that the footage was in fact from 2024, recorded during nationwide demonstrations over rising food costs and had nothing to do with any current protest against His Eminence. The statement stressed that the Sultan does not participate in partisan politics and that his position, in their words, then and now, has been consistent. Also this year, the palace had to respond to a completely different strain of false narrative, one pushed by a foreign commentator identified as Mike Arnold, who circulated posts falsely portraying the Sultan as orchestrating a supposed Islamic agenda against Nigeria. That claim was widely condemned across Nigerian commentary as dishonest and reckless, sitting at the extreme end of this spectrum, but it comes from the same underlying dynamic we're discussing tonight. A trusted, high-profile figure whose image and words keep being appropriated by people whose agendas have nothing to do with what he actually said or did. Place this week's endorsement denial inside that timeline and a clear picture forms. This is, by my count, at least the fourth time in roughly 18 months that the Sultanate has had to publicly correct a false narrative about His Eminence. And each time, the underlying complaint from the palace has been consistent, that an institution whose entire value rests on being trusted by every Nigerian, regardless of party or faith, keeps having that trust exploited by people manufacturing content for clicks, for political advantage, or simply for chaos.
Let's be fair to how different sides are likely to read this politically, because that's what responsible reporting requires. From the standpoint of the presidency and its supporters, there's a reasonable case that this entire episode is being overstated. A viral clip taken out of context is not evidence of wrongdoing by the Tinubu campaign or the APC, and the Sultan's own team has now closed the matter with an unambiguous, on-the-record denial. On this reading, the real story is the recklessness of anonymous accounts manufacturing political content for engagement, not any coordinated attempt by government-aligned actors to manufacture northern establishment backing. It's also worth noting that as of this broadcast, neither the presidency nor the APC has issued any public comment on the matter at all, which some will interpret as a deliberate choice not to dignify a claim their side did not originate. From the standpoint of critics and opposition-leaning voices, there's an equally reasonable counter-argument. They will point to a broader pattern, not unique to this incident, where prominent northern religious and traditional figures find their names and images pulled into pro-government narratives ahead of elections, whether by design or simply by supporters eager to manufacture the appearance of consensus. On this reading, whether the original poster had any direct link to any campaign is almost beside the point, because the damage of a false endorsement narrative is done the moment it goes viral, well before any correction catches up to it. This is a well-documented dynamic in disinformation research globally. False claims travel faster and reach more people than the fact checks that follow them ever do. Both readings can be true simultaneously, and I'll leave that weighing to you. What is not in dispute, because it comes both from the Sultan's own media team and from an independent fact check by DUBAWA, is that the underlying claim that the Sultan endorsed Tinubu for 2027 is false. So, what does a story like this actually mean for you, the ordinary Nigerian, scrolling through WhatsApp after a long day? A few things, I think, are worth sitting with. First, this is a preview of what the road to 2027 is going to look like. More clips lifted from unrelated events, more old footage recirculated with new misleading captions, more statements falsely attributed to respected figures who never made them. Increasingly, the burden falls on the ordinary citizen to pause before forwarding a clip to a family group or reposting it to a timeline of thousands. And that is not a fair burden, but it is the reality we are in. Second, think for a moment about what repeated corrections like this actually cost an institution like the Sultanate. Every time the palace has to issue a statement setting the record straight, it is, however briefly, being dragged into the very partisan battlefield it has spent decades trying to stand above. That has a real cost, even when the correction succeeds, because it normalizes the idea that the Sultan's name is available for political manipulation. And once that door is opened, it is very hard to close again. And third, for people in Sokoto and across the core north especially, where the Sultanate's word carries enormous religious and social weight, a false endorsement claim like this one is not just a media story. It can shape conversations in mosques, in markets, in family compounds, long before most people ever encounter the correction. That is the real human cost of disinformation involving a figure of this standing.
Here is my honest take on where this leaves us. What should happen next is fairly straightforward. Platforms need to be far more consistent about labeling or removing content that independent fact-checkers like DUBAWA have already rated false, rather than leaving corrections to trail hopelessly behind the viral spread. The original poster, whoever is actually behind that account, owes the public some accounting for how footage from an agricultural policy event ended up captioned as a presidential endorsement. And every Nigerian consuming political content between now and 2027 owes it to themselves to slow down before hitting share, because the next clip in your timeline may be next week's headline. As we close, here's what remains open, the things worth watching as this story develops. Will Habibu Yusuf Sodangi, or whoever controls that account, respond publicly to the DUBAWA fact-check or to the palace's characterization of the post as malicious?
Will the presidency or the APC break their current silence, given that the false claim, intentionally or not, worked in their political favor? And as we move deeper into this election season, will the Sultanate be forced into a 5th, 6th, 7th correction like this one, or will platforms and political actors finally start treating a revered institution's name with the caution it deserves? Those questions stay open tonight. If this breakdown helped you separate what's fact from noise, do like this video, share it with whoever forwarded you that clip, subscribe so you catch how this story moves, and let me know in the comments where you stand on it. This is NAIJA News Online, holding the line on the facts. Till next time.